Hello, and welcome to our next video in our COVID Coaches series. In today's video, we have Alexa Camus, who has been here before, so I want to welcome her back. Today we're going to be talking about a very important topic. The title is The Family Survival Guide During the COVID Outbreak. We know that globally, not just in the US, not just in Europe, not just in the Caribbean, but globally, including China, the domestic abuse numbers have skyrocketed during this time, which means that there's a lot of conflict taking place inside the household. So we have our expert back again today to speak on what we can do during this time to help our families endure without causing more conflict, dealing with the conflict, and especially hoping that the abuse does not spike up where you are. Alexandria, welcome back.
Hi, Colin. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for having me again. And it is a very interesting topic which you are bringing today, and I hope it's going to be helpful.
Yeah, based on your expertise, I know for a fact it will be helpful. And this is right in your area of expertise. So I want to start off the top. What can families do to hopefully address the fact that the household is getting a little more tense? What can families do to avoid conflict during this time of COVID?
First of all, of course, as we mentioned in the last session, it makes sense to consider eliminating 4 triggers of conflict: criticism, defensiveness, contempt, looking down at the person,
Right.
stonewalling when you shut down the communication. And this would be already a good start. How to do it, you can refer to the last episode. But to prolongate what you can further for that would be, of course, to decrease anxiety and deal with the fact of emotional vacuum and try to connect on a deeper level. What do I mean by that? Of course, to decrease anxiety, you need to follow the guidance, learn how it's transmitted, and to get more information. But I believe by this moment, every family pretty much have done it already. After that, we would like to try and still keep a connection with each other. It might be very difficult because nothing is happening, and because it is artificial situation, we might need small artificial boosters to boost communication, to bring some essence into how we can learn about each other again and deeper. Because on one hand, we already know everything as we think about our family. But as we evolve, so do our values, so do our goals, and it's nice sometimes to update on those things. But very often it seems not very natural. So I do recommend several things which can make your communication more fun, more interesting, and increase the depth of your communication.
And before you go into those examples, I want to point one thing out. Based on the people I've talked to who have reached out to me with this question, their families are not having the communications so freely on COVID, and they don't really have a lot of guidelines they're following. I think one challenge is some family members may believe they should follow some guidelines. Some family members don't believe they need to follow some guidelines. So I want to just come back to that for a moment, because this little small thing does cause a lot of conflict when you have some people who will take this seriously, and then some people who will sneak out of the house and go somewhere with other people and then come back to the house and potentially put people in the house at risk. So this is a specific case. How would one handle that?
Usually each family needs to find how to deal with it and set up rules for every single case, because all our beliefs, all our behaviors, they are rooted in our beliefs, right? If I believe that the virus was artificial, if it's nothing serious, if it's not as deadly, and if I'm sure that I will not get it, apparently my behavior will be very different from the person who scared about family and discussing what does it mean for you. Like some people would just go due to protest, right? I'm not going to listen. I like my rights. I want to do what I want to do. Why people would tell me? And going deeper, what does it mean for you? And why is it important? Because it's always about deeper meanings. And if you look at person's belief, their behavior always makes sense. So communicating about deeper things, and usually as a rule with my clients and in my family as well, we decided to go with more concerned person.
Okay.
But this is our solution, right? Because in different situations, we usually change places, right? Who is more concerned? But we agreed that we will go with safest option and with worries of more concerned person. But it makes sense to discuss about the values and why is it so important for you and what does it mean and what it represents to you.
Right.
With your openly.
And I'm very glad you said that, because we did the exact same thing in my household as well. I've shared previously, initially in the beginning, I wasn't acting so concerned as my wife was. She was very, very concerned. And you gave me some good feedback last time on how to make sure that I'm following the agreements that we made. But we did the exact same thing. We went with the person who was being the most cautious and had the most concern. So pretty much everything she recommended, we did, and I agreed to do. So that really helped a lot. So I definitely support that recommendation. You mentioned earlier that another tactic is to agree on a time of connection and make it real, deep, and fun. So how do we do that?
First of all, because pretty much everyone's personal space will be somewhat violated to a certain degree, because in real life circumstances, we do have much more personal space, right? And now we all stick together in a very tight space. So it would be natural desire to isolate ourselves for a little bit, because we will have more irritable and like it's natural desire to have your bubble.
Right.
And it's fine to spend in your bubble the majority of your day, as long as you decide that at some point it's nice to establish rituals of connection. For each family it can be different. For someone it's kind of morning coffee and good morning kiss or hug, or maybe dinner together or cooking lunch together. But it's time when you agree that you're going to be together, and it's nice to put technology aside and try to concentrate on each other and have a meaningful conversation. And because nothing is happening, as I mentioned, it might make sense to bring some questions which will facilitate conversation in depth. Like I prepared several things, like if I advise something, I like to have a recommendation how easy to execute it, not to be just abstract. And I'm using this thing, table topic. Yeah, you can buy it on Amazon, and basically they consist of different topics and different questions, quite safe, but they go a little bit in depth behind, a part of what you usually discussing, what you eat and have been, what did you read. I do like it. I even use it for semi-casual business dinners. It brings conversation to a very different angles, and it helps to know people better. And even when you know someone very, very closely as your family, you still can find them very interesting and enriching. Another proposal which I usually do, if you don't want to spend money on buying games or conversation starters, there are some applications for the phone which you can get free of charge. And I do recommend Gottman Card Deck, which will look like this in interface. And some of them intended for couples, but the open-ended question section, it can be used also for all family members. If you click on that, maybe if the kids are young, maybe not all questions will be applicable, but the majority of questions will be applicable to all family members.
And these are...
Like one example, if you could wake up tomorrow with 3 new skills in which you excel, what would they be and why? And they're just different things to establish what are your dreams, what are your fears, and things like that.
Yeah, so what this sounds like to me, I call these family icebreakers, right? And icebreakers are usually for strangers, but sometimes when there's tension, sometimes coming to a table, having a conversation, and not dealing with the tension first, but breaking the ice. And I think these questions are great. I call them icebreakers and boredom breakers because, as we know, during this time, people are at home and they're getting what? They're getting bored. They're really, really getting bored. And a lot of times when we get bored, we tend to get a little more anxious, and things tend to bother us a little more. But if we're able to first come together and agree as a family that, look, we want to take some time together to bond, to communicate. We don't necessarily need to start communicating about the COVID right away. Let's just have some fun conversation. If you could have one superhero strength, what would it be? And make a lighthearted topic where people can laugh first, and then maybe we can start talking about things that are a little more deeper. Son, daughter, wife, how are you feeling right now? Are you scared? Are you nervous? You know, you can sort of open things up once you've sort of broken the ice. So I think these icebreakers and table topics, these icebreakers are tremendous. You also mentioned something very powerful before. You said when you're having a conversation with your family members, it's important to turn towards them in communication. What does that mean, turning towards them in communication?
Our everyday interaction consists of very small comments, and just sometimes they look almost meaningless, right? Like, oh, Colin, nice shirt, and you're like, yeah. We call master of relationship people who are good at in relationship. They would comment something and react on that. But some people, I would say, like, Colin, good t-shirt, and you're like, and it seems like a small thing because my comment can be, great weather or something. Negative reaction would be like, seriously, like, we're talking about weather now, but it's not about weather. It's about my desire to connect with you. And I'm just using small excuses to start conversation, to connect deeper, because I need you. I want to connect with you. And when you shut down communication, or you watching into TV, or you watching into your phone, you send the message, you don't matter, I don't care. And it going to create a bigger distance between us over time. So each time when person says something to you or searches for your attention, it's nice to react. And I know sometimes it can be difficult. I have a 1-year-old which requires attention occasionally.
Right.
It's very difficult not to skip, because sometimes when you're doing it for 300 times per day, you want to say like, okay, come on. But it's very important to give the time to have a close relationship and turn towards when they are trying to say something to us, even if those are small things.
Right, and I think that as a parent or adult, we have to push that in our household. And you gave a great visual when you have the person on their device talking to you, because this happens. Kids talking to the parents, kids talking to each other, parents talking to each other. Right, a lot of times people communicate like this, and I think it's very important that the parent find. I don't want to say push, because that may cause more conflict, but it's important that they find some quiet time where the family can come together in a device-free environment, maybe at the kitchen table, and we say, guys, here's the rules. No devices for this 30 minutes that we're going to talk. Now, I think initially there may be some pushback. Talk about what? This is so lame. This is so whatever. It's so boring. But I think this is exactly where having those icebreakers, having those conversation starters come into play, because you know your children, you know your family, you know your parents, your in-laws. Typically, you can find a question that may interest them, and that helps tremendously, because you want them to start to what, as you said earlier, Alexandra, we want to create a routine. You want them to want to come to that 30-minute family time we have each day, because that little calm time will go a lot to help people not say things later that will cause conflict. They'll bite their tongue a little more. So I think that is a absolute great tip. You also mentioned, and I think this is equally as important with couples as it is with family, you mentioned giving physical affection, a touch, a tap on the shoulder, but something physical, because it releases something. You can explain it better than I do, but it releases something in your brain that makes you feel better.
Correct. When we are social human beings, right? Even though if we like to think of ourselves as independent and everything, the nature is that we've been created social, and we do need other people, and we do need a feeling of belongings, and we do need feeling of connection. And with technology, sometimes when it looks that we have so many friends, but in reality, when there are not that many people whom you can call when you're really sad, or who can give you a hug, or who can say like, I'm here, like you can talk to me. And family is the first, the closest, and in terms of time, the longest period of time group with you,
Right.
which can give you that. And nurturing physical contact when appropriate, like of course with teenage it will be not a hug, but maybe tap on the shoulder or high five or things like that. But having a physical connection usually shows affection, and it also creates oxytocin in our brains, the hormone of happiness, so called. So even in positive psychology, they do recommend exchange, as many hugs per day as you can. But, I calculated I do on average 5 or 6. If you could do that, it would be great. But if hug is a little bit of a stretch, try at least tap on the shoulder, or as I said, any physical connection, or at least express verbally if
Right.
physically it's easy. And sometimes just I love you sounds a little bit overused. You can express the value of another person in other words. If relationships are good, you can even joke in a way. Like saying something, I'm glad that I have, or I'm thankful that I have this relationship. Or sometimes I'm saying like, oh, I'm lucky to have a smart husband. I've heard, like you have a terrible character, but you are pretty, so it's easier to love you all together.
If my wife started by saying how handsome I was, I'd be very wary what she's going to say next. Like, what's going on here? But I'll tell you, it's interesting what you mentioned about the contact, because as you know, we are now, I want to say week 10 of the I'm not saying lockdown because we're no longer on any lockdown whatsoever in China, but it was about 10 weeks ago where the outbreak took place in Wuhan. And, the Chinese culture, they're not as physical as family members, as we are in the West. So when you mentioned hugging, I know a lot of my Chinese friends, when they see their parents who they haven't seen in a long time, or when they want to express themselves physically, they'll do a tap. They'll do a tap on the shoulder, right? And that means just the same it means to us getting a hug. So it's important that regardless of what your culture is, find out what that appropriate touch is and try it. I think it's very important for us to go out of our comfort zone during this time. The name of this segment is the Family Survival Guide. And if you guys listening, you'll notice we haven't talked about how to resolve conflict, right? It's not so much about how to resolve conflict. It's more about how to survive this time. And Alexandra has a very interesting statistic she's going to share with us. And it's maybe why we're not talking so much about how to resolve conflict. So please share your shocking statistic.
But one more note before we jump to statistic about hugging. Please hug only your family, because during coronavirus, it's not recommended to hug other people when you're trying to get oxytocin in your blood and happiness. So probably people with whom you are together is a good idea. Strangers or to say hello, not a good idea for a time being.
First of all, thank you for saving me. Yes. Now, we are under the assumption that everybody is following the protocols. One of the first things she talked about was educating yourself on the regulations and following the regulations. So our assumption is that you are inside your house, and all of our tips is speaking on family, okay? Family, okay? Don't hug the delivery guy. Even if he's being very, very nice, okay? Don't hug the delivery guy, okay?
Okay, so talking about statistics and conflicts, Master of communication and disaster of communication, we do have pretty much similar lives, right? It will be different maybe depending on country or gender or social class or whatever, but the problems which we are facing, they are pretty much exactly the same. And more than that, they've been the same for centuries. There are approximately 19 areas which can include all the problems which family can potentially fight over. And it would include like emotional connection, handling stress, romance and passion if it's with spouse, critical incidents, children, communication with parents-in-law, affairs, values, teamwork, power struggle, money, spiritual development. But the thing is, not many people know that 69% of all problems will be never resolved.
Never,
Like
69, never.
Cannot, like technically cannot, because they rooted in our beliefs, in our character, and in what we think is right. You know, if I as a kid, I don't want to go to bed at 10, I want to have my freedom and rights, and you as a parent telling me, I'm paying for your school, it's expensive, I need you to go to sleep because you will be tired tomorrow, you will never be able to resolve it completely. So it would be consisting of compromises when you switch the position and how to discuss and what are the meanings. And it's about solution for a time being. And it's almost one, you know, each case separately when you're trying to identify how to solve it. But despite the fact that there are two news, right? One is good, one is bad. The bad is that 69% never going to be resolved. But the good news is that if you master other skills, those 69% of problems will not affect your relationship, because masters of relationship and disaster of relationships, they still have the same amount of problem,
Right.
but they don't experience the same level of stress. You know, masters still feel loved and connected, and they know they can be heard and they can find agreement. And meanwhile, disasters will have completely the opposite situation. And over time, even a very tiny thing can grow into a fight very spontaneously.
Right.
And it all depends, you know, if we master our skills, because same as you're learning about business, you can learn about relationship.
Well, I think that is masters of relationship and disaster of relationship. I think that's a good comparison. I hope that we're all able to find that good balance, right? Because we both have those both powers internal to us. So I want to ask you one final question before we wrap up the session. And of course, I've saved the best question for last, and I am putting you on the spot. We did not rehearse this question. Now, families are spending a lot of time together now, which means that we now have the best opportunity to resolve some long-standing conflicts. We're here every day, as opposed to just ignoring each other. Why don't we take a time to try to resolve some of these? As you mentioned, a very high percentage, 69% of conflicts aren't resolved. They may be compromised, they may be forgotten about, but they're not resolved. Would this now be the time? Of course, I think you're going to say any time is the time, right? But would this now be the time to try to address the conflict, or should this now be the time to try to maintain and just make it through this time and then try to address it later?
Well, I think using the opportunities that you are all together and you have a lot of time, it makes sense to build up some skills. And it makes sense to strengthen the friendship and the basics which would make your relationship very strong. Because the moment when your relationship is strong and you have the right conflict management skills, it's going to improve many areas automatically by itself. Because if you have habits which destroys the communication or relationship, it's very difficult to build when there are no base. So building the base would be a perfect time right now. And I know we are concentrated on family, but usually those things are stemming from our example model. If it's, you know, both parents or single parent, kids would make take example from a parent, and the way parent handles conflict, the way parent builds friendship, it's going to be an example, and this is an amazing time to do it. And of course, for couples, there are extra opportunities to take tests, because with just taking a psychological test, like Gottman University has an amazing test based on research, with 90% probability, Colin, 90%, they can predict if couple will divorce or stay together. And they have an amazing book, which written for couples don't get against yet, because those actually rules are applicable to communication with all family members. Because the way we processing issues with partner are exactly the same how you're going to react on conflict with your children, is exactly the same personality and beliefs which you're going to reply to your parents-in-law. And this is the key. So I do believe if you're going, because it's human, you know, like it's for human communication,
Right.
with close people, with family, with close friends. A couple is one example of a human relationship, but those rules can be generalized and applied to wide population of close people.
Right. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. So the lesson here is take action now. Build that base. If you're able to build the base now, it'll help you in the future. And I want to sort of summarize what we talked about today. So as far as, okay, go ahead. Yeah.
1 second, sorry for interrupting. And for those who would like to learn about that, you either can read a book using the time, if you would like to do something. The recommended one is 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work by John Gossman, or you can email me and I can share more information about the test which you can take, and you can see the strong areas in the relationship and relationship zones which can be improved.
Okay.
Sorry
no
for.
And no, that's a great point. And we'll have that in the book title and everything in the graphics. So you guys should be seeing that now, or you should have just seen it. If not, oops. Okay, so the focus today, the family survival guide, right? How a family can really make it through this time of COVID. Hopefully, family will be doing things to make it in general. The first thing, make sure you learn about coronavirus, prevention, the regulations, and follow the guidance. Follow the guidance that's been put out there. Make time to connect with your family. That could be 30, 40 minutes a day. No devices, having conversations. It doesn't have to be about the bad news about the COVID. It can be about anything that helps the family talk and connect. And there are tools that you can use to help that as well. If you are able, this is a great time to try to resolve some conflict. If you guys are able to build up that trust and safe place in your household, it's the best time to do that. If you're not able, then just maintain. Alexandra, I want to ask you to let people know how to get a hold of you, but I also want to add one thing. You mentioned there's a lot more domestic violence happening. If you are in a household and there is domestic violence taking place, please contact the correct authorities, whether it be the police, whether it be a hotline, but try to do something to help the situation, because we don't want anybody being emotionally or physically damaged during this time. So, Alexa, how can people get in contact with you?
Okay, I think there is an email provided. It's either via email, which you probably seen on your screen. That would be the easiest way.
Okay, great. So listen, Alexandra, thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you back very soon for another topic. And again, I think you're in Shanghai, very close to me, maybe a few miles away, and hopefully we could do this face-to-face at some point. But great to see you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much for today's episode. Have a nice day.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.